We are live. I'm Seb 3.0, and today I'm speaking with Friederike Ernst, who is the co-founder and COO at Gnosis. Gnosis just recently merged. I know Ethereum merged like 2.5 months ago, but all of a sudden Gnosis Chain merged out of nowhere. So I wanted to talk to Friederike about why Gnosis Chain merged and why now, and what it means for the Gnosis Chain ecosystem, and also talking about some of the new developments that are going on in Gnosis Chain, like account abstraction, building in privacy, and all the sort of interesting stuff that's going on in the ecosystem, like DAOs, etc. And I also want to find out why she thinks people in the blockchain space don't value decentralization enough. Before we get started, though, please make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and the like button to get notified when I do live streams every single week. My guest, Friederike Ernst, is coming up next, right here on The Interrupt. Hey.
Hey, it's good to be here on this side of the interview room.
yeah. It's good to have you. So for context, for those people who listen to this podcast but have no idea about the other things I do, which, there might be some people in that camp. Friederike is the co-host of Epicenter, which is a podcast I also host. And we usually interview guests together, but today I'm going to be interviewing her. About Gnosis Chain, the ecosystem, and specifically like the Gnosis Chain merge. And this is something that I did a bunch of interviews at DAppCon a few months ago, and I had talked to Stefan, and this was right when Ethereum was merging, and he told me about the fact that like Gnosis Chain was going to merge at some point. And I totally forgot about it. And then I think you told me about it last week, and I was like, okay, we have to do like an interview about this. This is a little bit outside, like, usually we cover a lot of, IBC, Cosmos, interchain stuff here on this show, but I really like, what you guys are doing over at Gnosis. And so we'll step outside of the boundaries of what we usually do to talk about this other important stuff.
Outside of your comfort zone. I like
For sure. No, but it's like, also like, yeah, you have to also step out of your comfort zone to like learn about other protocols, and
it's a little bit outside of your comfort zone though, because basically Gnosis Chain has the IBC model but for Ethereum. So basically it's like outside of your comfort zone, but basically just barely the other side.
Yeah. Cool. And I prepared here, like I got all my Gnosis swag and everything. So yeah, well, let's dive in here. Like, tell me a bit about your background, even though I know the background, but like for our listeners, what's your background and how you got involved with Gnosis?
Yeah, so my background is in physics. I was a research physicist. I dealt with low-dimensional complex quantum systems. I was firmly en route to becoming an academic for life, and then chickened out at the last minute to co-found Gnosis, which at the time was set to become a prediction market protocol, which we did actually build. We also built a metric fuck ton of other things along the way. But so we built lots of stuff for the early and then later Ethereum ecosystem. Like the Gnosis Safe wallet, that's now its own company. CowSwap, it's also its own company. We built lots of DAO tooling. And now we're here with Gnosis Chain.
Yeah, I think a lot of people maybe have forgotten that Gnosis was once, trying to build a prediction market, and it was like kind of pioneering in this space in the early days of Ethereum. And you guys have built like a metric fuck ton of shit of stuff, and I mean, like I remember once seeing you give a talk about conditional tokens, and it just seems like there's so much research and so much, just like so much R&D that Gnosis has pumped out. And in addition to that, like actual products that people use, the bigger products that most people associate to Gnosis and use are not the prediction market. It's like Gnosis Safe, or now like Gnosis Chain, but it's produced like enormous amounts of value and also like standards for the industry. I feel like, I mean, like Gnosis Safe is the standard that everybody uses, and it's like a huge value for the ecosystem. I often wonder, like, I also CowSwap also, like, I should remember CowSwap as well. How does Gnosis actually make money? What is the business model?
Well, currently the business model is that GNO is actually Gnosis currently does not make money. So I think maybe this is kind of what I can preface this with. So the GNO token is a staking token on the Gnosis network. So basically, if you stake GNO, then the transaction fees of the network accrue to you, just like Ethereum is a staking token for the Ethereum network. Currently, the fees harnessed that way are fairly low because blocks are not filled up all the way, so the fee market hasn't kicked in. But in principle, that is the way that the GNO token would accrue value to the GNO holders, including the Gnosis DAO. The way that we have financed ourselves over the last couple of years is by doing a conveniently timed ICO in early 2017.
Just being
Being
really early.
being early and being good with money. So
Yeah.
basically, the 12.5 million that we raised back then are lasting us to this day, and we still have a couple of 100 million left over.
It's a good place to be in, and actually doing things with that money, because there are a lot of people that raised ICOs, or a lot of projects that raise ICOs that are just kind of sitting on the money or have not really delivered, on any of the things that, or actually provided, much value.
Oh yeah, no, totally. I think we've built a lot of things. I think we've built tons of stuff. We haven't rug pulled anyone. So
yeah. Cool. So yeah, let's talk about Gnosis Chain here. And first, I want to maybe go back a little bit and talking about the where it came from, and with the story with XDE and how like that chain came to be, because I'm like, that's kind of fuzzy to me. I know the history, I think, from the point at which it became Gnosis Chain, but I don't have much context for what happened before. So like, yeah, what was the story there?
Yeah, so Gnosis Chain actually started as XDE Chain in 2018. It was one of the very earliest side chains to Ethereum. Gnosis Chain ID is 100, so that gives you an idea of how early it was. And it actually started as a proof of authorities chain. So there were 20 known validators, so trusted parties, who would take turns to validate blocks. So it was not decentralized in my mind, but basically what would pass for decentralized for many other chains. But we always wanted to kind of take it further than that. So it was always kind of, in terms of technology and what was possible on XDE chain, it was always a very tech heavy chain that a lot of OGs deployed to. But we wanted to make sure that it is seen, and it actually is one of the most decentralized chains out there, so sufficiently decentralized, which is why we started a Gnosis beacon chain exactly a year ago before the merge. We only noticed on the day that we actually merged that it was exactly a year ago. But we started a Gnosis beacon chain that ran in parallel to Gnosis chain, exactly as Ethereum did 2 years ago.
Okay, wait, we skipped some parts here, because like XDE became Gnosis Chain. I feel like we skipped that part.
Oh yeah, let me back up then. Yeah, so there was a vote in the Gnosis and XDE forums about Gnosis and XDE joining forces. So XDE actually had a staking token called Stake. This is how you know it was an early chain. Stake was still available, and basically the Gnosis DAO ended up buying out all the stake holders and gave them GNO instead. So basically, stake was replaced by the GNO token as a staking token.
Yeah, that's just, it's like, Has this ever happened before, where like a chain kind of buys out another chain?
No, I think we were the first.
Yeah, yeah. I remember that at that time, like reading through the
Especially,
forums, and there were some people that I think were not happy with this, but like overall, I think it has been like a benefit for
yeah,
the ecosystem.
there were some stakeholders who were not happy because they felt like a lot of the other side chains slash L2s had 100x or something recently, and they felt XDAI was still liable to go that way as well. So basically, when they were given 50% more than what their nominal share was, they were unhappy because they felt they had been cheated out of like 100x, which is I mean, it's not reason. I mean, yeah, I mean, you can take that stance. I wouldn't say it's a reasonable one, but also it turned out that in the actual vote, that was a very small minority of people who just happened to be very loud on the forum.
But were the XDI team and the Gnosis chain team, like, how did that merging come to be? Were they both like in Berlin, or did you know them, or it just kind of like, how did that happen?
Yeah, so we knew them. We felt that we had very commensurate values in terms of what we wanted for the chain, and they were also very solid engineers. It actually turned out that merging the teams wasn't as easy as kind of merging the tokens, and they eventually all left. So basically now Gnosis chain is populated by Gnosis people and people whom we hired for this purpose.
Okay. And so it's been over a year now that merge has happened, right?
Well, the XDAI and Gnosis merge.
Well,
Yes.
sorry, like
Yes.
the like merge zero, which is those two chains merging. That's been a while now. And so you mentioned that, like, so Gnosis chain was running as a proof of authority chain with some like small-ish amount of validators, but it was a proof of stake chain, right? So it's like proof of authority, proof of stake Ethereum.
Well,
Right?
yeah. So in principle, yeah, it was more of a proof of authority. Yeah, it was a proof of authority chain.
Yeah. And so there was a beacon chain that was adjacent to the way Ethereum launched its beacon chain. There was a beacon chain for Gnosis chain that was launched like sometime about a year ago. And what
Exactly.
was the idea there? Like, the idea was to basically kind of mirror the merge with as Ethereum has merged.
Exactly. So basically, I mean, the way that the merge on Ethereum happened was that basically instead of one client, you actually have two clients, one execution layer client and one consensus layer client. And basically, the execution layer just worked as it always has, but the rules as to who is allowed to build the next block, that's set by the consensus layer, and that was kind of that was merged in. Because obviously the execution layer in Ethereum testnets has also always been able to run on its own. So basically, there's plenty of Ethereum testnets that were never proof of work, right? So because for testnets, proof of work is terribly a bad idea. Is usually a bad idea. So that's always been possible to kind of run the consensus separately from the execution. And this is basically how Ethereum merged, just switched out how the consensus layer works. And the same happened for Gnosis chain, only that it didn't switch from proof of work to proof of stake, but from proof of authority to proof of stake.
And so now there's so after the merge, just like with Ethereum, there's like an execution layer client and there's a consensus layer client, and validators will run both of those clients. But are there several, or is it like, I think with Ethereum, there's like 2 or 3 per, like there's 2 or 3 execution layer
Yeah,
clients and
there's
2 or
5
3
each for
there's 5
Ethereum.
each. Okay.
Yeah.
And is it the same clients with Gnosis Chain, or are they
Yeah,
different
so
clients?
Gnosis chain is actually one of the very few, maybe the only side chain / layer 2 with more than one client. So basically in terms of consensus layer clients, there's Taku, Prism, Lighthouse, Nimbus, and Lodestar. And on the execution side, we currently only have Nethermind, but Aragon, Geth, and Besu are going to come soon.
Okay. So why did this merge take an extra 2 months? What was the reasoning behind waiting until after Ethereum main chain had merged?
Yeah, originally we said we might do it before Ethereum, but there were a lot of hard engineering problems that were not just copy paste from Ethereum for Gnosis chain, because we transitioned from Aura proof of authority consensus, and there were a lot of because it's a very old chain. There were a lot of legacy debts that needed to be taken into account, and once we'd kind of missed front running Ethereum, we didn't really see a good reason to hurry up and risk anything. So we kind of we just like Ethereum, we went through several shadow merges before we did the real thing, and the real thing went off without a hitch. So
Good.
I think that was the right call.
Did you have a big party at Full Node?
We did not have a big party at
What?
well, actually we had yeah, sadly we actually had our Christmas party at Full Node the next day, but
Okay.
somehow it seems like literally all of Berlin is sick. So this was it was like literally the only party that we've ever had that wasn't completely overrun. Actually, there were maybe like 60 people here or something, which
Yeah.
for usual Full Node party, it's like
Quite.
probably a quarter or something.
And so what were some of these technical issues, like these technical challenges that you had to go through, and what did you learn from the post Ethereum merge that helped Gnosis chain
Oh,
merge?
there's a lot of moving parts, right? So I mean, obviously, you need to make sure that you keep on producing blocks and that you're finalizing and everything works on that end. But also the other side, so basically things like token explorers and infrastructure and so on, that also all needs to work through the merge. Basically, so there's a lot of moving parts, and I think this is something that we generally don't appreciate enough. Also, how much for Ethereum, the merge, how much of a coordination effort it truly was.
Yeah. I wonder though, like, I mean, because the Ethereum ecosystem is so vast and there's like so many moving parts and applications using it and contracts, and what was it as challenging, or was it easier for Gnosis to kind of like line up all of the stakeholders and application developers and block explorers and everything? Like, was it easier, or was it like, how would you qualify that?
I think it was probably easier and harder. So basically, it was easier because there are fewer dependencies on Gnosis chain than there are on Ethereum. So basically, if there's a fuck up, there's a fuck up. That's still bad, but it's not as bad as kind of downing Ethereum, right?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it was probably harder because there wasn't basically at the time. If you think back to the week of the merge, Ethereum had the full attention of the ecosystem. Everyone
Yeah.
knew this was happening, and obviously we did not get that same bandwidth of just brain power.
Yeah, because like it's a smaller ecosystem, but at the
Yes.
same time, like, and also you guys are like one team, right? So like Gnosis is very much sort of, I think, leading development on Gnosis chain. So you're probably like sort of centrally controlling, or not control, coordinating a lot of the teams around like integrating with post merge.
Yeah. So actually, interestingly, most of the people who actually work on Gnosis chain on the protocol level don't actually work at Gnosis proper. They work at
Oh,
the clients on the clients,
right.
right? So
Yeah.
basically uh, the clients have teams that are dedicated for Gnosis.
Oh, we lost Valika. All right. think maybe she turned off her browser. There she is.
Hey, sorry, I just got a saying something went wrong. Like, yeah, no shit.
Okay. Yeah. So you were saying that the client teams are the ones who are working on.
Yes. So obviously
Yeah.
we have the same thing as Ethereum does. So basically like a co-client
Yeah.
coordinator. But yeah, so basically the protocol development happens client side.
Okay. So what happened at the merge? Did it just worked? Everything worked?
Everything worked, surprisingly, literally everything worked. And we went from 20 validators to 110,000 validators, like just
That's
like
insane.
this. It
Okay.
was insane. It was fantastic.
So I'd like to talk about about the validator ecosystem here, because like on the Cosmos side of things, typically chains have between like 100 to maybe 175. I think we can push it to like 200 validators. That's what Tendermint consensus kind of works with. I think it could go up like a little bit more than that, but generally we're in the 1 to 200 range for like instant finality Tendermint consensus. Obviously, Ethereum consensus works differently, and this is what allows it to have many more validators, but also making some compromises on finality, as I understand it. What does it mean? Like, how many of those validators are like in? Do you have any sense of how many of those validators are like individuals, or are they running on like home validators, or are they running on infrastructure? Are they delegating? Like, give us a sense of what the validator landscape looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think to kind of back up a little bit, I think we kind of, I mean, obviously this makes us look good, right? The number,
Yeah.
but I think we need to be honest here and kind of compare apples with apples and oranges with oranges. So, in my understanding, if you look at the Tendermint consensus and the Cosmos protocol, that's
Yeah.
like individuals, or I mean, individual entities that kind of run nodes, right?
That run nodes for
Where
delegators. Yeah.
yeah, whereas in the Ethereum ecosystem, and basically that extends to Gnosis as well, basically Ethereum has 450,000 validators, but that just means that there's 450,000 instances of 32 ETH
Yep.
being staked, and
Yep.
basically anyone can run. I mean, there's a limit how much you can physically run on on hardware, but typically like 100 or 200 validators per decent sized hardware is totally within the realm of the possible. So basically, when we say there's 110,000 validators on Gnosis chain, we don't mean that there's 110,000 distinct entities that run validators. There's yeah. So, and I think basically this is it always makes me a little bit queasy, because obviously Cosmos is really decentralized, and just because there's, I mean, having 200 distinct entities run nodes, that's fantastic. That's great. So yeah, so basically Gnosis chain, the way that we approach this is we try to make it as easy as possible for people to run a node. And this has, to a certain extent, this has also been Ethereum's goal. So whereas on Cosmos, you need to be a professional to kind of really run a node. It's not really something that lay people should attempt or do attempt. This
Some
is
do.
not. Some do? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, look, if you have some amount of like DevOps experience, it's possible, but it is not trivial. Like,
Yeah.
it's
You need
not
to,
just like
you have
running.
uptime requirements and stuff, right? So basically
Yeah.
on Ethereum, you get penalized if you're not up. but you get penalized very little. So unless everyone actually goes down at the same time, then you get penalized a lot. But basically, if it's just that your computer goes down, like your kid pulls the plug or something, it's not non-punitive. So I mean, what basically for Ethereum is the bottleneck is that you actually need to stake with in increments of 32 ETH. And 32 ETH, that's a lot of money, right? So basically, most people don't just have that lying around. So if you want to stake less, you can delegate to someone, and someone else can stake for you.
Like a Lido or like any of these like liquid staking providers. Yeah.
Exactly. On Gnosis chain, the capital requirements are way lower. So you actually need one GNO that's currently a little bit under $100. And you can do it. I mean, you can do it on dedicated hardware like dApp nodes, for instance. But you can also do it on your home computer, provided you don't shut it off.
Yeah.
And it's fairly easy to install. We encourage all our people to do it. And we have many people inside of Gnosis who are very much, I mean, who are smart, but non-technical, and they can all do it. So it's like, we want to make it easier still. Ideally, I'd like to get to a point where you can just do in-browser staking or something. But yeah, I mean, it should be even easier, but we try to make it as easy as possible to kind of become a node in the Gnosis chain. Gnosis chain.
Why are there like any impediments to being able to do this like on a phone or something? Because like a phone is typically always on, and other than draining the battery.
Yeah, in principle, I think in principle down the road you should be able to do it. Currently, we're still not there, right? So basically, kind of it requires treating running a validator kind of as a product. And we try to do this, and I think we've actually made it at least 2 orders of magnitude easier to validate. But it's still not at the point where you just run it on your phone.
Yeah. So when you say that you need one GNO token to stake, does that mean that like basically like one token is one validator? So, whereas okay, so if there's like 100,000 validators, that means that there are 100,000 GNO tokens staked essentially.
Yes.
Okay. Do we have a sense of how many people or entities that is? Do we have like any metric to?
Yeah, it's difficult to say. I would guesstimate it's on the order of 1,000 or so. So basically, you can see where these GNO lie, right? So basically, it's GNO that are on the same address. Obviously, it's the same person, but often people kind of run validators from different GNO addresses and so on. So yeah, I would estimate between 500 and 1,000.
That's pretty good. I mean, like I think that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, basically we're trying to get to we know that so basically from IPs and so on, we can see that there's GNO validators in 42 countries. And basically we want to get to 100 because obviously there's different jurisdictional influences that can be exerted upon nodes. So basically having this be truly distributed and not just in the same jurisdiction, to us, that's a huge upside. What's also important to us is that people don't just run it on data centers, right? So basically, in principle, you can run it on AWS servers or Hetzner or elsewhere, but that's not as good as actually having people stake at home, which is why very early on we partnered with people who make and distribute hardware that is dedicated for home stakers. So people like dAppNode and Avado. Because basically a network that is run by at home stakers, it's unstoppable. And I think this is where we need to get to.
Yeah, I've been like wanting to buy one of these dApp nodes. Yeah, I think I met. I mean, we had a podcast on Epicenter with
Edu?
and Edu of Dapnode, and he was showing me that product, and I think it's like a cool product. It is, I think, for a lot of people a bit prohibitive because it does cost upwards of 2,500 euros or something like that. But I
This
mean,
is
you can do like a lot of things with it. Like you can run a Bitcoin node, you can run an Ethereum validator, you can do like IPFS and a whole bunch of other stuff. So
I mean, basically, what one should say that you can actually do all of these things in parallel. But basically, if you have like a disused computer that you don't typically shut off or that you don't need to shut off, you can
yeah,
also just get all the packages from Dapnode for free and install them
sure,
on that computer. So in
yeah,
principle, it's not tied to buying the hardware.
yeah. Is there like a high memory requirement? Like, you can't do this on like a Raspberry Pi or something like that, can you?
Can't do it on a Raspberry Pi.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. Cool. Yeah. So before the show, you told me that you felt that decentralization is something that people don't value properly, especially in this ecosystem. And I know that this is something you've talked about before and we've chatted about. What's that about? Why do you think we don't value decentralization enough?
I think it's something that's gotten lost over the years. So basically, I think people who actually started this ecosystem, they were idealists and they were driven by the idea that um, doing something in a truly decentralized and distributed manner makes systems incredibly resilient. Um,
Mhm.
and I in a way this is what the entire blockchain ethos has been built upon, but then we lost part of that in like the intervening hype cycles. So obviously kind of blockchain, that blockchain as a tag drew in a lot of money, and people kind of forget um what what it was that drew people in the first place. So now we see lots of blockchain ecosystems that are, as we say in Germany, DINOs, so decentralized in name only.
Yeah.
The German regulatory slang thing, but um, and in the way you lose. So basically, building something on distributed networks is really hard. It's so much harder than doing it in a centralized fashion on a server somewhere, on a service, on a server service somewhere. Um, so basically, if you do that, you need to make sure that you also reap the benefits. But basically, if the distribution just consists of having 15 known entities, or sometimes even fewer than 15 known entities, between whom this all happens, that's a list of people to call if you want to shut anything down. So I think that's you're getting a lot of the downsides without actually getting the main upside. Um, and yeah, so this was my controversial take, that people don't value decentralization enough, and people forget why decentralization is important until the minute that they need it, until the three-letter agencies knock on their doors and shut down their blockchains. People forget it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if that's such a controversial view, at least like not in the circles that I run in.
You
Um,
have nice circles.
well, I mean, you're in my circle, so so no, I like. I feel like there is a part of the kind of crypto community um, that is building software and building like decentralized applications, and where a lot of the decision making process also includes, or the decision making process also takes into account the amount of decentralization in not only the validator set but also in governance. I know like this is something in Cosmos that we talk about a lot, where, well, for example, on many of the top Cosmos chains, validators like Binance and Coinbase and Kraken are often in the top 5, if not like first or second. And this this causes problems because, well, they control a large stake, and they also don't vote in governance. And there have been instances, or at least one that I know of, that governance wasn't able to pass quorum because one of these validators, one of these exchanges, wasn't voting. And so there's a lot of conversation and debate, I think, about like, how do we address that? And yeah, for me, it's like also part of this conversation that we want to maintain this ethos of decentralization. And I feel like the Ethereum ecosystem, certainly, and many of the chains in Ethereum also carry this ethos, and certainly like Cosmos does, and Bitcoin as well.
I think Cosmos does, for sure. I think we in the Ethereum ecosystem don't always get this right. So, I mean, if you look at EVMs, in the Ethereum space, EVM chains, I mean, if you look at them by kind of transaction volume or so, the number one is definitely Binance Smart Chain. And so basically people are paying transaction fees for being included on Binance Smart Chain, which is definitely not a decentralized chain. And then all the L2s on top of Ethereum, they are all centralized they have a centralized choke point in the form of the sequencer. So basically there's in very basic terms, there's one entity that's allowed to build blocks. That's the sequencer. And the sequencer can exclude anyone they like from being included in this. And basically, these L2s, they talk about decentralizing the sequence. And I think eventually they will. But until then, there's a very centralized choke point that can be used to basically shut down or censor transactions.
You're thinking specifically of like Ethereum L2s.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, also L1s in the Ethereum ecosystem, right? So basically Binance, Smart Chain, Polygon, and so on. It's all fairly centralized.
Yeah.
I think this was actually something really good that actually happened to the Cosmos ecosystem. That you remember a couple of years ago when the entire it looked like the Interchain Foundation and kind of all of the different entities in that it was a huge mess and it kind of fell apart. But I think because there was no centralized stakeholder anymore, it actually enormously, I mean, it could have gone either way, but it enormously benefited the Cosmos ecosystem in the end, because so that didn't happen for Ethereum. And I think, Ethereum is decentralized mostly.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at OFAC compliant blocks and kind of so it's kind of, I think we've turned around. And Gnosis recently released, this is one of the other things we were doing. We recently released a relayer that doesn't censor. It's called Agnostic Relay. And basically ever since, the number of OFAC compliant blocks on Ethereum has come down significantly again. So yeah.
Yeah, we need to do a whole episode about that on Epicenter at some point, the whole OFAC thing. So how does so someone here was asking in the chat how governance works on Gnosis chain. So do people vote directly? Like, there's no delegated voting. It's like direct voting.
Yes.
Okay.
And in principle, you can delegate your votes, but there's no interface which kind of shows whom you can delegate to. So basically, people currently use it mostly to delegate to an externally owned address if they have something on a smart contract wallet or something. But we need to establish some sort of delegation system, because obviously you can't expect every GNO holder to know about all the things going on in the GNO in the Gnosis ecosystem. you can't expect everyone to keep abreast of that. So kind of delegating in principle should be fantastic to have.
So let's zoom out here a little bit and talk about some of the interesting innovations that are happening on Gnosis chain. And one of the things you mentioned earlier, you mentioned like some tweet that said that basically Ethereum goes through 2 years of research and development to avoid 2 minutes of downtime. And I think that it's like a good way to look at it, right? There's like a ton of research and development and debate and working to find like the best technical solutions in order to avoid any potential downtime to the chain. With Gnosis chain, maybe the approach is a little bit less conservative, where there's like less at stake, at least for now, and that enables you guys to move a little bit faster and maybe move fast and break things is not the right way to look at it, but at least I think it's always been in the ethos of Gnosis chain to try to be as like feature compatible with your Ethereum as possible, but also pushing the envelope on like some very innovative and kind of cutting edge stuff. So what are some of the things that you guys are working on now that like people should expect in Gnosis chain? And then how does that like research then, how does it benefit Ethereum directly, where because it's been built on, like it's been done on Gnosis chain, then there's already some amount of research and testing and experience that this can kind of flow up into Ethereum. Is that the idea?
Yes, I think that can happen for many of the things that we're planning to implement. So if you look at what the onboarding experience is like for people who come into the crypto ecosystem, it's bad, and it's uniformly bad between different ecosystems. I believe it's the same in Cosmos as well. So basically, you onboard and you're told these are your 12 magic words. Never lose them, never show them to anyone, or you'll lose all your money. Obviously, this is a terrible onboarding experience. So basically, things like onboard with email and later change your password or change who's your guardian for your seed phrase and so on. Having social recovery, to me, that is something that is absolutely necessary. It's absolutely necessary to have, and the way to actually go about this is to institute account abstraction.
What is account abstraction exactly?
It means that every account that gets created on Gnosis chain is automatically a smart contract wallet in the backend. Basically, for us, that would be a Gnosis safe, and that's kind of it's the de facto standard in the Ethereum ecosystem as well. So basically, that allows you to replace the keys that sign for that account after the fact. So basically, you can say, okay, I'll let you onboard your Sebastian at gmail.com or at whatever.
That's my email, by the way.
Yeah. It's not you. I'm not doxing you here. So basically, and that way, basically, I can custody your keys for you. But if you want to take custody back or give custody to a third party, you can rotate the keys. So basically, you can take away my signing pair and you can put in new keys. And obviously, that will facilitate onboarding because you can upgrade security after the fact. And you don't have this, how when you download MetaMask for people and you're like, oh, these are the 12 words, can you write them down? You can't take a screenshot on your phone. I mean, basically it's terrible. This is not how we will onboard the next 100 million people. So basically, instituting account abstraction, this is number one for Gnosis chain in the new year. And I think
so just on that for a second. I mean, the issue with account, to the extent that I've used things like Argent, which I think was one of the earlier wallets to do this kind of social recovery. Like every wallet is a smart contract. The issue that they ran into there with Ethereum, at least, was just the exorbitant fees, right? I mean, it's like setting up a wallet was expensive, and then also transactions are also more expensive. With this sort of account abstraction, is the idea then for that to be kind of at the chain level where it doesn't have the same relationship to fees as like some other smart contract would have?
Yeah, I mean, there's different ways to do it. So basically, you do it on the account level, on the protocol level, or you have like some sort of relay service. And basically, in terms of engineering, all of these are feasible. It is true that basically, if you have very simple transactions, then yes, it is a lot cheaper to actually do it from an externally owned address wallet. But there are certain things you can actually where you can improve the user experience markedly, namely by rolling different transactions together. You know how you have to kind of on Ethereum, you have to set an allowance for your wallet for a certain token, and then basically in a second transaction you then have to um, to uh, uh, do the transaction itself, and basically rolling this into one, so you can actually do this in one transaction, and you can do much more complicated flows as well. And you can even do things like you can abstract the gas cost away from the user completely. So basically, you
Yeah.
can, for instance, have it such that when people use your dApp, that you cover the transaction cost, while kind of making the money back in some other way, and there's no need for people to actually pay for each individual transaction.
Yeah, that's really cool. What do you think of like? So I'm also of the opinion that 12 words is not sort of the long term way that we onboard lots of users. Maybe 100 million is a good number, but and I also think that this kind of progressive securing of one's account, right? So where you can start with an email address and then move to something more secure as your account balance grows, or over time. I think this is also a great idea. Where do you stand on the like MPC versus smart contract line? Like, because like some people are building this as MPC systems where you have like basically one share of an MPC, and then like some company has another one, and there might be like a third one for a backup or something. And then there's like the on-chain smart contract model. Which is better in your opinion, or are there like what are the trade-offs here?
I think you can replicate more or less the same things with either. So basically, a smart contract is so I'm not an expert on the MPC implementation, but basically on what you can do in a smart contract is you can have very granular permission settings. So basically you can say, like, for instance, I will give a key to this person. They can spend up to $200 a month on these kinds of things. I don't know, on this educational store or whatever for my kids. And then you can give keys. You can give out keys that in principle can replace keys but can't do actually any transactions themselves. You can have like social recovery. You can have social recovery where you say, look, these are my 10 closest friends. If 8 of them agree that this is really me, but I've lost my keys, I can just wipe this clean and kind of put all new keys and so on. So in principle, smart contracts are extremely flexible in how you implement this and how you augment it after the fact.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the smart contract approach. I mean, I think it introduces issues with it introduces issues when fees are high, but for something like Gnosis chain where fees are like fairly low, I think it's a good solution. I don't know how that would work on Ethereum though. Are there any discussions already about like how this would work on
Yes.
Ethereum?
Yeah, so I think this is kind of the general discussion of what should be on Ethereum base layer and what should go in the layer twos, or basically, what you can actually do with dank sharding. You can have like lots of information that is in principle available for the layer twos, and you can kind of roll up transactions into very pinpointed transactions that get checked into Ethereum. So basically everything is checked in principle, and basically with scaling solutions, I feel that for the foreseeable future, we will probably be okay. Will it last us forever? Probably not. But yeah, I think in that sense, Ethereum has moved itself into this position where it kind of banks on layer 2s on top of Ethereum. So basically I think basically distinguishing between a sidechain and a layer 2, which people sometimes use basically people sometimes mix them up. So basically a sidechain is a layer 1 that runs in parallel to Ethereum, but is connected with ideally trustless bridges. And then there's the layer 2s, which kind of intermittently give their state to Ethereum to kind of make sure that everything that's included in the layer 2 is also included in Ethereum, and thus get base layer security from Ethereum. And where Cosmos has kind of gone the different L1s that are trustlessly connected with each other route, Ethereum has gone the L2s on top of Ethereum route. And I think basically Gnosis Chain is a little bit between the two, in that it is a sidechain that runs in parallel to Ethereum, but is trustlessly connected with bridges. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, with Cosmos, I think we also are starting to see like different models emerge. I mean, not quite yet, but there are like, we can sort of see them in the distance with things like Celestia that potentially will host a whole sort of set of applications as rollups, and then these would also be either connected directly through some IBC implementation or via the Celestia main chain. And then there's also all of the smart contract chains in the Cosmos ecosystem. Although these don't like typically have L2s, they run applications, and so then the idea is, okay, well, how do these interoperate through IBC? I don't know of any sort of traditional kind of, like in the traditional sense, roll-ups like in the form of ZK roll-ups or optimistic roll-ups in the Cosmos ecosystem. I don't know that like people are actually working on that, other than in the context of like something like Celestia, where there's like a data availability layer. But yeah, perhaps at some point, once like block space becomes scarce enough, that might become like a necessity.
I should add that other L2s that Ethereum has, Gnosis has them as well. So basically, we have optimistic rollups and ZK rollups, and they work exactly the same way as in Ethereum. And we actually make sure that new dApps actually deploy to them. So someone in the comments asked whether there was something like POAP on Gnosis Chain, and POAP is actually on Gnosis Chain itself. But I think in the very beginning, POAP was on Ethereum mainnet, and it just became unfeasibly expensive. So they migrated to Gnosis Chain many years ago. But for instance, you guys may know the Dark Forest games. They're deployed on Gnosis Chain, but not on Gnosis Chain directly, but they're on Optimism on Gnosis Chain. And then there's a payments network called Oli that we're launching, that's also deployed on an optimistic rollup on top of Gnosis Chain. So basically, we try to kind of mitigate this and kind of prolong the time until block space becomes much more expensive by already kind of pushing things to L2s on Gnosis Chain even before Gnosis Chain blocks are full.
Yeah. So this reminded me, there's like a few more things I want to hit on before we wrap up here, and I realize that you have a hard stop. But so yeah, this Visa Oli product I think is super cool. So how does this work, and when is it going to be live?
Oh, so it's it's already live, but it's currently in proof. It's in proof of concept. So basically, the team, we have cards, but that's it. It is a Visa card. that is also a hardware wallet. Basically, it holds your private keys to your Gnosis chain account. You have your stables in there. You tap on any Visa terminal worldwide, and it takes your stables out of your Gnosis chain account directly, and puts them on the Visa payment rails. It is more or less instant, so it takes 6 seconds. And it's got the exact same user experience as a traditional credit card. So you tap, and unless it's above a certain threshold, like in Europe, it's often 50 euros or so, you enter a 4-digit PIN, and that's it. That is literally all you have to do. And the super nifty thing is, if the merchant accepts stables, and they're basically, if enough people actually have these credit cards, they are very much incentivized to do so, because the Visa payment stack takes about 2% out of your purchase. If the merchant accepts stables directly, Visa is bypassed, and you pay in stables from your wallet to the merchant's wallet, and they save the 2% that they would have spent on the Visa stack.
So when Stefan told me about this, it just like blew my mind. So like because you guys, like, he started getting into some of the like the technical specs of Visa, and apparently there are like some extra messages that you can send. So you guys kind of like really took apart the Visa protocol and leveraged the this sort of like very proprietary protocol in order to be able to do this. But like this idea that you can use your Visa card and it'll fall back to stable coins and send stable coins directly if the merchant accepts them is so cool. Like I've never heard of anybody else do this, but it must be like very technically complex to be able to initiate that transaction from the card itself on the payment terminal.
Actually, that's I mean, not to kind of knock on our achievement here, but that's not actually all that technically complex. You just need to make sure that you integrate well into the Visa payment rails, and you actually need to work with someone who is like an actual payment processor. So basically, we actually did this as a joint venture between us and SaltPay, who has they have millions of Visa terminals in Europe, and Tangem, who actually make the credit cards that are also hardware wallets. So basically, it's kind of, there were very disjunct pieces, but the actual signing of the message is less complex than you'd think. But what's the beauty of it to me is that it's a form factor that people instinctively know how to use, because many crypto products, actually maybe all crypto products we've built so far, have been crypto products targeted at crypto users, and this is something that is targeted as at normies. So basically anyone can use a freaking credit card. We all know this.
Yeah. Yeah, and so it's currently like running as a pilot. When is it going to be available to the public, and how can I sign up?
I think we'll circulate a Google form shortly for people to kind of get on the wait list. I think first half of next year is a good guess.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and so we talked about account abstraction. Yeah, let's talk about this bridging stuff a little bit, because
Sure.
yeah, I'm not like very plugged into the state of like interoperability in Ethereum, and like I realize that there are some very particular challenges there that are different from the challenges in the IBC world. And so, how are you tackling this with these ZK-like client bridges that you mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, IBC was kind of designed for a world of interoperable blockchains, right? I mean, this is kind of the design spec for IBC, and Ethereum very much wasn't that. So what is always tricky between different chains is you need to know what the state of the other chain is, right? So because you need to know, if you send something, what that's actually, if you receive something from a different chain, you kind of need to verify the state of that chain in order to kind of reproduce that token on the target chain. And what in principle, I mean, if you look at how it's done now, usually it's kind of multi-sigs. So basically, kind of like 5 parties or so who independently look at whether a transaction has happened, and then kind of automatically sign off on the transaction in the target chain. That's kind of multi-sig bridges. But what you can in principle do is you can have a light client that verifies the state of the target chain, or the chain that funds come from, on the target chain. You can have light clients on those chains directly. Obviously, you can't really run a light client on Gnosis chain or Ethereum, just because in terms of compute, it's really expensive. But what you can do is you can actually put it into a ZK circuit, and use the succinctness quality of the zero knowledge circuit, in order to prove the state of the chain on the other chain. And that's exactly what we did. So we have ZK Light Client Bridge between Gnosis chain and Ethereum, and in principle, it can work between any EVM chains that are on proof of stake, because you rely on the validator sync committees for this as well. But yeah, so you have completely trustless bridges. Obviously, I mean, they're currently they're around in there's a proof of concept. It doesn't currently operate under load, because we've been hesitant to kind of transfer everything from the current multi-sig bridge, the Omni bridge that we have between Gnosis and Ethereum, because we have seen so many bridge hacks over the last year. And if with a completely new technology, obviously, the space to make mistakes is enormous. And what we will actually do is we will use a multi-sig of bridges. So we will have 2 bridges run in parallel. So the old multi-sig bridge, the Omni bridge, and the new ZK Light Client bridge. And if they both agree that there should be a transfer, the transfer will happen. If they don't agree, then nothing will happen and will have to be resolved. But that means in order to kind of hack the bridge, not only do you have to find a bug in the ZK Light Client bridge, you also have to compromise more than half of the signers to the legacy multi-sig bridge. So basically, it's kind of like putting a sieve in a sieve, right? So it becomes a lot less probable that people actually find 2 bugs at the same time. And we are also cooperating with a number of other teams who build implementations of ZK Light Client bridges. For instance, there's one within the status community, and there's one at Berkeley. And they basically, in the long run, where you want to get to, is that you have several implementations of ZK Light Client bridges between Gnosis chain and Ethereum and any other chain that you want, but you don't operate them singly, but you operate them in tandem. So basically, only if all 3 different bridge implementations agree that something should happen, this will actually happen. And basically finding vulnerabilities in 3 different bridges at the same time, obviously this is much less likely than finding a vulnerability in one bridge. And I think this is kind of how we can how we can do this in the interim until they are tried and tested under load.
So with this implementation, what's the what is the implementation path? So do all chains need to implement this ZK Light client, and then all of a sudden they're just like you can bridge them all together, or do you need to create
it's a two-way bridge?
It's a two-way. So much like with the IBC, like every chain has to create a bridge with another chain. So you have to have these channels. Okay. And in terms of like the user, I think like the user experience of bridging is one that is an issue that is often overlooked, right? So like, you might have one experience with one bridge, and with another bridge you might have a different experience. It might not be like compatible with your wallet. And the nice thing about IBC is that like if you use any Cosmos chain, moving assets between chains is, it's like, you know, it's you do it the same way across all chains, right? Like it works in any wallet. Wallets applications have implemented it, and so the user experience of moving assets is fairly simple, and it's like quite pleasant to use. What does it look like with these EK bridges? Or do we expect that like the UX will kind of be unified across all EVM chains, or will some of them have different implementations that may or may not be compatible with some or some other wallets? Like what's the complexity matrix there?
Yeah, in principle, they need not be compatible, but I expect that there will be a de facto standard that people will adhere to. The problem that we have in the EVM space is that as soon as you bridge one asset over a bridge, that asset gets newly forged basically on the other side of the bridge, right?
I mean, same
So
with, well, no, sorry, yeah, with IBC, no, that's not the case. Yeah,
yeah, and
yeah.
then
I mean,
what you
but it is like a fungible asset. I mean, although, you know, if you IBC, say like from chain A to chain B, and then chain B to chain C, and then back to chain A, I don't think, no, that you basically have to unwind those transactions in order to come back to the main token.
Yeah, so basically on EVM chains, it's like that as well. So basically the things that are bridged, if the same token gets bridged via different bridges, it's de facto non-fungible. It's not the same token. So basically what you actually end up relying on is an army of market maker who will kind of exchange those different representations of the same token for like a basis point or 2 basis points. And then basically the dApp developers will have to make sure that basically if someone comes with a token, that they somehow integrate this army of market makers or like a marketplace for exchanging these tokens, so that the user doesn't have to be bothered by which token it is. I think this is something that we can abstract away quite easily from the user, and users shouldn't have to know what bridge their tokens came over. Ideally, they shouldn't even have to know which freaking chain they're on. It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, they should know which apps they want to use, and then things should just work. And I think this is where we'll get to eventually. It'll take a little bit of time, but yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah, well, hopefully, yeah. I think like the UX around interoperability is like probably one of the biggest challenges in crypto. Yeah, with you know, like accounts, right? Like, and securing one's coins. They're inherently huge problems that don't have a single solution, but maybe several solutions that we need to try out. And you know, well, I think we can. I think we've covered a lot here, and yeah. Thanks for doing this, and thanks for
having me on.
allowing me to explore this ecosystem a little bit deeper. It's been interesting.
No, it's been super lovely to be on, and it's super funny to be on the other side of the interview.
Yeah, and now I've done three of the, I don't know how many episode hosts we have now, but 3 of them have been on an air up. So now Meher needs to come on, maybe Felix, and yeah, I guess that's mostly the main ones.
Fantastic.
All right. Thanks again.
Thank you. Bye.
And to our listeners, thanks you for tuning in. If you want to get notified when I go live every Thursday, please make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and the like button. Until next week, hope you have a good one.